Hello, citizens of YouTube land.
Hey,
It's your president and your VP, and we are here for the first time with a new series that we're doing for the upcoming month of January. As we're filming this on New Year's Eve here, it'll be probably uploaded tomorrow, but it's the beginning of War Movie Month. And first up is The
the
Patriot,
Patriot for the Revolutionary War.
which is a 2000 film that premiered um, June 30th, 2000. Uh, and it was directed by Roland Emmerich. It stars Mel Gibson, Heath Ledger, Jolie Richardson, Jason Isaac, and a whole host of other people. So this tells the fictional story of one, Benjamin Martin, who is loosely based off of the historical men Andrew Pickens, Francis Marion, Daniel Morgan, and Thomas Sumter. So it currently has for those of you who care, a 62% on Rotten Tomatoes. I feel that that's not completely fair, but it's
I think
pretty
it's fair.
close. We have differing opinions on this, so it's going to be a little bit on the contentious side this time around, guys, as we haven't really done that before. But we're going to try to explore more of this in the future with me defending or contrasting against certain films, as well as him doing the same thing when it comes to certain ones. We're going to try to do things a little bit differently this coming year to hopefully add a little more context and a little more entertainment for you guys out there. So, yeah, it the story begins in South Carolina. It's shortly after the Revolutionary War begins, and they have basically called a delegation for South Carolina, which is where the majority of this story takes place. And oh, I forgot to mention Adam Baldwin is also in this film. And for those of you who might remember my Chuck or our Chuck unboxing video, then you know that Chuck stars Adam Baldwin as an NSA agent. So we may be making some jokes regarding that in this review. So, yeah, it begins with them coming to Benjamin Martin's house and they're asking him to come because he's basically like an elected representative of the people here because they apparently had been doing this from the beginning, so to speak. And so they go and they have their little qualm about if they should join the war or not. Now, the funny thing that we have to mention right away, guys, is that Benjamin Martin's servants are actually paid
Yeah,
and they're freed men.
yeah.
Uh, that wasn't likely to actually be true. It could have been to a certain degree, but certainly not in South Carolina. Because if you guys know your history, you know that some of our founding fathers actually did not want, well, let's not mince words, they did not want slavery to be really a thing in our new nation. But in order to get everybody on board, they kind of sort of had to include it because if they didn't, they wouldn't have the southern colonies on board. So there's that. So right away, this story is completely fiction in so many regards. Uh, because, like I said, so Benjamin Martin's oldest son wants to join the war and wants to join the efforts of the colonists that are for independence. Benjamin, of course, doesn't want this to happen because he needs his help, and well, it's his son. I mean, who wants to send their son off to go do those things, right?
Yeah.
Um, but he's pretty set on it. So he joins, and basically one of Benjamin Martin's friends is like, hey, don't worry, I won't have him out on the front line. I'll have him doing secretarial work, or medic type of work away from the front line. But Benjamin says, yeah, try telling him that, because his mind's pretty much made up. And there's this love story between Heath Ledger's character and another girl. And this girl, apparently, at the age of 11, when they were both young, he had put ink in her tea, and it stained her teeth black for a month. This is somewhat important a little bit later on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the British here are painted as cartoon villains. Let's not mince words about it. They are. And it's the same thing in one of Mel Gibson's other works, Braveheart, where they're portrayed as cartoon bad guys. So, what's up, Mel? Why you got to do that? you know, uh, you're Australian, so you should be kind of sort of loyal to the crown, so to speak. But that's a whole other topic, I guess. So, yeah, they are dead set, pretty much, the British, on enforcing their rules. And they keep referring to Charleston as Charlestown. I'm not sure if that was a British thing or what, because we tend to refer to it as just Charleston now. So I don't know. But yeah, so the British, they come to Benjamin Martin's house. And because a war had basically just happened right outside of
A
a
battle.
battle had happened just basically right outside of his house.
Yes, a war just happened right outside of Benjamin Martin's house. A full scale war, guys.
Yeah.
Multiple battles and everything.
And they're
I'm
basically
sorry.
just like, and listen, because those of you who kind of understand history, this is really kind of a thing that did sort of happen, where the citizens that weren't involved in the war came out. And because this happened in the Civil War too, they basically came out and watched it, and were like bringing picnic baskets, and they were like, okay, it's a party. We're going to have a good time. We're just going to watch this. And then when it starts happening, they're suddenly shocked by what's going on.
Yeah, we're gonna just watch a guy get his head blown off by a
Uh,
musket.
uh, uh, the musket makes the guy sleep with the fishes. We have to keep things vague. You know this. We can't really say that. But because YouTube has new rules and whatnot, and we're trying to continue to skirt by and skate by like we always do with these types of things. So, uh, yeah, they show up and they basically tell the freed servants that yeah, you could come join us and you'll go ahead and be free. But that's when they're like, actually we already are, and they pay us. And the main bad guy, he basically says, well, then you'll have no problem joining us and whatnot. So he captures all of them and basically forces them to join, and well, impresses upon them service, which is a thing that happens a little bit later on as well. If you guys know your history, that British sailors were impressing American sailors into their navy during the Barbary Wars, because that was the first time under President Jefferson that America ever got involved in a foreign war. So there's that. So yeah, um, and as this is happening, because uh, certain members of the South Carolina militia had been injured, and the British seem to have believed, with probable cause actually, that Benjamin was helping the wounded. And apparently that was a big no-no to him. And here's the
He
thing.
says anybody who helps the rebels will lose their homes, and he said torch it.
He torches Benjamin's house, and he promptly basically makes Benjamin's middle son sleep with the fishes.
Yep.
And this alone is
This
what
causes Benjamin to go into a blind rage, and so he takes his two youngest sons, by the way, and he's like, "Remember, just shoot whenever I tell you to."
aim small, miss small, is what one of them keeps repeating. But here's the thing, guys. Why would you make your 6-year old kid and your maybe 8 or 10-year old kid, however old he is, join you on a path of vengeance when
Yeah,
you alone should be the one to atone for your sins?
yeah,
So, yes, this happens, and they move very quickly like ghosts because they're not really seen, and they attack the brigade and capture, or they rescue Heath's character. And
and
so
then Benjamin, he basically goes to one of them and takes a tomahawk and promptly
makes them sleep with the
choppy
fishes.
choppy him.
So yes, and because they are no longer able to capture him, basically Cornwallis, who those of you who know your Revolutionary War will understand who this is, he is involved in this movie too. So there's sprinklings of real historical figures with entirely, completely fictional characters. And, excuse me. So Cornwallis basically tells the main bad guy, because he's not the main bad guy, that you have to be able to capture this guy. And so there are other things that lead up, and that lead up to all this. Um, but Benjamin, he joins the militia and is immediately made the general of the militia, like no questions asked,
Yeah,
because of his experience with the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War,
yeah,
which I might want to point out to certain people out there that, technically speaking, this was your first world war, so to speak, because it was fought on every single continent available to be fought on.
yeah. So, stuff happens. The British ambush Benjamin and his militia, capture some of his men, and then Benjamin rides up to General Cornwallis, and he's like, "By the way, some of your 18 of your officers will be executed if you don't um,
Yeah.
if you don't release your prisoners."
And this is also, he brought back his dogs who he had captured too. They're Great Danes, and he had trained them basically and showed compassion to the Danes to the point to where they follow him. And so he tricks Cornwallis because the 19 officers are actually, in fact, dummies. Now, this enrages Cornwallis to the point to where he gives the main bad guy carpe diem to do whatever he wants
Yeah, he
by
says
any means necessary.
he says some of my tactics would be considered brutal.
And this leads to a scene that we have to talk about in a more serious tone now,
Yeah,
because it's the church scene. And those of you who know, you know. It was in poor taste, and it is pretty much identical to an incident that happened in 1944 involving the Waffen SS in France.
yep. Um,
It is very sad and unfortunate what happened, and we pray and we, our hearts go out to the survivors and to their families, because we're not going to make light of that. It was an extremely ugly situation that never should have happened. We will address it to a certain degree because the SS, pretty much in revenge for Normandy, had done something very similar to the church scene. And we're not going to really talk about the church scene because those of you who know,
You
you know.
know.
So, yes, this happens. And Heath Ledger's character by this point had married that same little girl, and her family were in the church.
Yep.
And so they launch an attack, and Heath's character basically gets the drop on the main bad guy.
But he doesn't double tap him, guys. And then the main bad guy makes sure that Heath Ledger's character is sleeping with the fishes. Oh,
War
not to mention the fact that Adam Baldwin's character also also ratted out Benjamin's family and where the people that helped him were. So,
and he was directly involved with the church thing.
yeah.
So the main bad guy, it all kind of leads up to this big scenario, this big battle scene where the Americans, they trick the British, because Cornwallis, he tells his army to basically advance over the hill. But what's at the bottom of the hill? But all of the American army, including the militia. The professional army is there.
The Continental Army.
So they push back and they stop retreating. They hold the line, and it all comes down to an unrealistic one-on-one battle between Benjamin Martin and the main bad guy. And he makes the he makes the main bad guy sleep with the fishes via an American flag staff. You know, the thing that holds the American flag. Yeah, I can't say it, but yeah, he does that. And so there's the epilogue where, because Cornwallis lost, he eventually was trapped at Yorktown, which those of you know, Washington had managed to come down from the north, surround him. The French Navy was blocking his escape. Thus, he had no choice but to surrender. And it was, we, as Irish descendants, also have a bit of a problem with Cornwallis in a way, because it was him that instituted another 100 years of Irish oppression at the hands of the British, because he was the governor, and he is the one that helped enact the Union Act, which, yeah, it wasn't for another 122 years that Ireland became an independent country. And even today, they don't have all of their island, because they kept the northeastern part to the United Kingdom. Now I kind of get it. It is what it is, guys. But and I would like to see a peaceful reunion of the entire island. However, there's a lot of conflict there between Irish Protestants and Irish Catholics. And so there's this cycle that, until they're able to resolve their differences, will continue. So, after all that, though, um, guys, the battle scenes are incredible, incredibly realistic at times too, other than the cartoon fight toward the end with the main hero and the main bad guy. But it shows incredibly realistic stuff that happens with We can say amputations.
Yeah.
Amputations and things of that nature. And it really shows the brutality of what it was. Because as we said earlier, people really did come out to watch and were shocked that this is what happens, you know? So there's that. But honestly, and it should be pointed out that some of the men that Benjamin Martin were inspired by were in fact slavers. There's no way to get around that he was based off of that, and yet they tried to say that he was one of the good guys because of that they were freed and all that when it didn't make a lot of sense, especially since it's South Carolina. They might have been able to say it if he was, say, Pennsylvania, yeah, maybe something like that, where the Quakers were completely against it, but it was South Carolina
Yeah.
in 1778,
Yeah.
to the point to where, listen, guys, some of those colonies probably would have just said, you know what, screw it, we're not going to join your union and we'll be all by ourselves. So they had to get them on board. But yeah, the battle scenes are incredibly realistic, but the story itself is very implausible and would have never actually happened. It is a tale of revenge, sure, but Benjamin Martin's not this true moral character that the movie tries to make him out to be. He's really not. He's driven by vengeance and revenge. So there's that. And it's weird. But I do have to mention that one of them, one of the characters is a man that's too old to fight. So he sends his, well, I won't say the word, but it's a derogatory word used to describe black people. And he calls him that and says that he'll fight in his place. As it turns out, this black man spends the entire year fighting for the Revolutionary Army in order to gain his freedom because George Washington had enacted that, apparently, and said that if they enlisted, they could get their freedom. And the British pretty much did the same thing, too. So,
But they only did that after Washington. Um, okay, let me backtrack here in the Revolutionary War history. Washington said that any slave who served 1 year in the army were able to get their freedom, just like they said in the movie. But then the British then also enacted that if you just serve your country, or if you serve for the king, no matter, doesn't have to be a year, you can earn your freedom. So there's that. So
yeah,
to undermine Washington.
yeah. So yeah, guys, this movie, it's pretty entertaining. Don't get me wrong. The best way to describe it truly is that it's fun, but it's very flawed. Final rating, 3 out of 5. What say you?
2 3/4 out of 5. One reason only it's not 3 out of 5. The freaking runtime, man.
Yeah, it is
2 hours and 44 minutes of nothingness.
Other than the battle scenes, which are pretty great.
Yeah, other than the battle scenes, but still, it's 2 hours and 44 minutes. Like, it's just too long.
But of course, as always, if you have seen The Patriot and you believe that it is the worst war movie of all time, then clearly you have never seen Pearl Harbor.
Oh yeah, there's that. I forgot about that.
There's
one.
that. So, anyways, guys, next up is going to be because we're only doing one of these for it. Next up is American Civil War, in which we are going to do the outlaw Josie Wales. So, until next time, there's only one thing left to say, and that is, of course, peace and love from Denny and Son. Bye.